very interesting speaker that's going to be speaking on a very, very germane and fundamental topic: how Nigeria became the fertility capital of the world. It's a very, very interesting topic. And I'm sure he's going to take it from a very fresh and different angle. Okay, Nigeria is reputed to be the fertility capital of the world. Very, very interesting. He's the founder of Factbox Company and Leadership by Data, and is a strategic communications professional with expertise in the global economy and political analysis and security. He has extensive knowledge in using data science and analysis to generate unique insights and results and speak on issues, stroke advantages or disadvantages. Okay. He has served as a consultant and development partner to Coca-Cola, Microsoft, Lafarge, the Security and Exchange Commission, Inside Communications, Publicis Group, Samsung, British Airways, Channels Television, the National Security and Intelligence agencies. Okay. He has a bachelor's degree in industrial and production engineering from the University of Ibadan, 2004, and an MBA from the Pan-Atlantic University and the Lagos Business School, 2008. He's a life fellow of the Nigerian Conservation Foundation. Please welcome with me Mr. Babajide Ogunsanwo. Babajide, you are most welcome in Jesus' name. Thank you for agreeing to speak with us. Thank you. Maybe the first question I'm going to ask you is, why did you decide to go into the specialty that you are now reputed for, strategic communications and using data and data science analysis and so on and so forth? How did that come about?
I wasn't prepared for that question. You caught me off guard on that, Pastor Itwa, but I'll answer it. I must also, first of all, say thank you for the special recognition. Thank you for making out time. And just as everyone else is on the platform, thank you for investing your time in the discussions we're about to have. Strategic communications and data for me wasn't the dream. It was, the dream was to actually become a chess player, to become a grandmaster. But I've always been inquisitive. Growing up, I've, more than a lot of my friends, my peers, I always ask why. So sitting in the classroom, across all levels of formal education I've been through, I never just would receive information without asking why, no matter how stupid it will sound. From Pythagoras' theorem to everything, I would always ask for more information. Why? So that's what really led me into the field of analytics, because I repeatedly kept asking why. As Muhammad Ali would also once joke about that, why are all the good things white and the bad things seem to be black? So we have the angels are white. Why? But the demons are black. And then we have the White House, and the beautiful things are always white. The Pope is white. So over time, I always ask why, and eventually I decided to focus on data analytics, because I noticed that a lot of conversations, national development conversations that were going on in the country, focused a lot more on opinions than facts. So a lot of the discussions really were people sharing their opinions on how solutions, on their perspectives of on the country and the world. But a lot of those opinions clearly were not empirical. They were not driven by facts. And so I saw a need to add a voice to solutions, but those solutions and those ideas and thoughts should be driven by a lot of quality research, a lot of facts, and a lot of data, so that the conversations would not just be opinions or perspectives. Those conversations would be based on things that have happened in history, based on things that have been tested, based on things that have been proven, based on things that have worked and not worked. And I strongly believe that adding that voice to conversations is going to improve not just Nigeria, the world as a whole.
Yeah, I heard you're walking.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I was saying that for a question that caught you a little bit off guard, you are quite extensive and detailed in your response. And I'm glad that somehow people like yourselves have gotten the bug of the new trends and things that keep on going all over the world. So maybe I should ask you another question. What's the effect of data now in world planning, in world issues, in even wars in the Middle East and things like that, and basically national planning? What are your thoughts on that? And what should most nations now be doing concerning the management of information and data?
Data is not just the future. Data has always been the past and is the present. What has happened over time is a lot of countries have leveraged on, they've kept it like a secret on how they've been able to make progress. And so when we see countries that have made a lot of progress and we see countries that have not, people have come up with a lot of reasons about why countries made progress, why they don't make progress. And even though there are a lot of reasons, the summary reason is planning. And most of the countries, if not all the countries, based on the research we've seen, the first step is having a plan. And your plans have to be measured by results. And you cannot measure results without using data. And so data has played a role across the private sector, the public sector, and countries for several decades. I've tried to keep this a secret, but it's now no longer a secret, whereby the role data plays in economic growth, the role data plays in welfare, the role data plays in the private sector. We see numbers everywhere. We see the numbers. You can't talk about the stock market without talking about numbers. You can't talk about welfare or poverty without putting numbers to it. You can't talk about trying to get a loan. It's all about numbers. You can't talk about your sales, your revenue. They're all numbers. Even if you want to measure the growth of the church, the growth of congregation, you cannot talk about the growth of the church without putting numbers to it. And so numbers are all around us. But over time, for many years, a lot of nations have tried to keep it a secret, but it's no longer a secret. The cat is out of the bag. And for countries and businesses that take their numbers seriously, those countries will have an advantage, a significant advantage over countries, businesses that do not use numbers.
Very good. Where do you think Nigeria is in this business of numbers and using data and so on and so forth? And how can a government like ours take better cognizance and better knowledge of numbers?
There are several ways we could look at Nigeria in terms of where we are in numbers. Or if we are to look at it, especially with the focus on Nigeria's facility, we can put it in a good perspective by looking at even how we started this discussion this evening. We started by the national anthem, Arise, O Compatriots, which was adopted in 1978. That's about 4.5 decades ago.
Go ahead.
When the national anthem was adopted, the population of Nigeria as at 1970 was, so as at 1978, when the anthem was adopted, was 70 million. Then the government, going by all the records, never had the plan of what the country would look like today. It was all about taking baby steps without really rigorously testing and planning for the future. So yes, citizens have kept reciting the national anthem, but the Nigeria of 1978, when we had only 70 million people, has now tripled. So we now have a country with a population in excess of 210 million people. Same national anthem, different environments. The issue is, as welfare and as the relevance of Nigeria on the global stage changed. And the sad answer, looking at the numbers, is no. If you look at it from whatever perspective, you look at it from when we adopted the national anthem, or perhaps even a more significant perspective, which is 1960, when we gained independence. And without trying to confuse listeners, I'll make this simple. In the year Nigeria gained independence, the global size of the world, measured by that popular acronym GDP, Gross Domestic Product, the world in 1960 was at a position where the GDP of the world, of the entire world in 1960, was $1.3 trillion. That was in 1960, same year we gained independence, $1.3 trillion. Nigeria's share of the $1.3 trillion in terms of our own economy was 0.3%. So in 1960, the world had the size of the world as measured by the gross domestic product, $1.3 trillion. Nigeria accounted for 0.3% of that. This is 63 years after. Nigeria still accounts for less than 1% of the size of the global economy. We're almost about the same place. The World Bank currently today says that Nigeria accounts for 0.5% of the world's GDP. 0.3% over 6 decades ago, 0.5% as of today. In simple terms, Nigeria has remained in the same position for the last 6 decades. 0.3% of the global size of the world in 1960, we're now just still at 0.5%. Compared to an economy like China, that in 1960, they accounted for only 4.5% of the world's GDP. Within the same period, 1960 to today, China's GDP has more than quadrupled. So China today accounts for approximately 18% of the global size of the economy. In terms of, if we're going to look at it, we call it market share. So China has an 18% market share of the size of the world. It was just 4% in 1960. In 1960, Nigeria size of the world, 0.3%. Now we are still approximately at the same place, 0.5%. A lot of the countries have been able to find a way to grow their population and use their population to grow their economies. That is the trick. A lot of countries have used their population to create resources and optimize the assets they have to then grow the economy. But in Nigeria, what we've done is we've grown our population, but we haven't grown our relevance on the world stage. So in 1960, our population then 45 million. Our population has grown in excess of 300%. However, our relevance on the world stage has remained the same. That is one of the major challenges Nigeria faces. And we've seen that consistently happen decade on decade since 1960. In 1960, for instance, if we look at the top 10 countries in the world in terms of the most populous countries in the world, Nigeria was not in the top 10 in 1960 when we gained independence. The facts from the World Bank shows that as at independence, our position was 14th. We were number 14 on that ladder of the list of countries with the highest population, number 14. As we speak, Nigeria is number 6 on the list of countries with the largest population. So clearly, we are significantly outgrowing a lot of countries in childbirth. However, we are not outgrowing them when we look at the key welfare metrics. And so looking at where we're coming from 1960, when even the country that colonized us had a population that was greater than us. So the United Kingdom had a population in 1960 then of 52 million, Nigeria 45 million. In 6 decades, the country that had a population that was greater than us, that colonized us, the United Kingdom, their population has grown by just about 17 million, from 52 million to what it is today of approximately 70 million. Nigeria's population has grown from 45 million to an excess of 210 million. The question is, what does Nigeria have to show for this large growth of human resource and human assets that it has been able to accumulate? The evidence shows that not only have we become the fertility capital of the world, looking at our population explosion, we have not been able to maximize the latent resources of our population.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that has now thrown us into the topic and the title for today, how Nigeria became the fertility capital of the world. I'm going to tease you a little bit, and maybe you need to give us the graphic reasons and what happened on a day-by-day basis, or maybe perhaps on a night-by-night basis, that now made Nigeria the fertility capital of the world. Are women the most fertile and the men the most productive, or what exactly happened? But then more importantly, maybe the factors that make Nigeria the fertility capital of the world, but more importantly, what happened and why has Nigeria not been able to take advantage of its population to drive its growth? I mean, if China can move from 4.5% to 18%, you know, and China and Nigeria economically in the 60s were almost in the same bracket in terms of overall social GDP and economic development. They were living in shanties. I mean, Malaysia, for example, or Singapore was perhaps even worse than Nigeria in the 60s. But they have also driven the economy very rapidly and so on and so forth. India is moving very, very fast as well, in spite of all their challenges. What happened? Why has Nigeria not been able to drive growth like it should have?
There are lots of reasons. If we look at research, there are lots of reasons. The easiest reason is what people will say leadership, but leadership isn't just the reason. What we've seen is that policies have not been consistent. And so the drive for change keeps taking a different turn. The governance of the country has also not been consistent. We've seen not only military leadership. Within the military leadership Nigeria has had, we've seen a lot of evolutions. So perhaps a military leader that had stayed for several years would have been more consistent than we having to see several military leaders with different ideas and different perspectives. And if we look at the research of every speech that a military leader made after takeover, he always said that he was not going to take the direction of the previous leader. And so leadership has led to inconsistent plans, inconsistent approach to growth and development, inconsistent policies. Everybody keeps blaming the previous leader. I often joke that perhaps the only leader that never blamed anybody for his performance was Abraham Lincoln, and because he was the first. But in Nigeria, and especially in Africa, whenever the military leader comes in, he blames the previous. Whenever a civilian president comes in, he blames the previous, and the policies and the direction keeps changing. And even in the last 5 months, it's the same thing we've seen. Policies keep changing. Ideas are never consistent. Our approach is never consistent. And so that's been a major reason. And clearly, yes, we know that leadership and those that have been managing the economy are not data-driven. They are driven by a lot of political relationships and affiliations. They are driven by insincerity of purpose. And sometimes it's also based on the research we've done. We've seen that sometimes we could also see that the capability and the capacity of the leaders and the institutions themselves has significantly led to why Nigeria has found itself in this position. Two things that I think are important to mention at this time, sir. Today is a unique day because if we look at where Nigeria was as an independence, then on an average, the rate of childbirth was in its hundreds. Now we're in a situation where in the first 5 months of this new government, based on the statistics we have from the National Bureau of Statistics and the World Bank, approximately 2 million babies have been born. You heard that right, sir?
From the start of this government?
From the start of this government, 2 million babies have been born.
Wow.
2 million babies have been born. Now, these are 2 million children that are not just only looking up to their parents, they are looking up to a country that will provide them a future. So clearly, we already are in a deficit of 2 million jobs. We're in the need of infrastructure that will take care of this 2 million. We're in the need of a security solution for these 2 million children. And so these are the sort of data and sort of thinking that leaders need to have, not just at the national level, at the states and at the local government level. And so unfortunately, we have a solution. We find ourselves in a situation where people are not looking at the data. People are just looking at their feelings, and a lot of decisions over several years have been made based on how the leader feels, based on how based on feelings. So we've made a lot of decisions based on feelings, clearly with feelings. Those decisions are clearly irrational. They are not logical, and we then find ourselves where we currently are. 2 million babies in the first 5 months of this government.
Wow. So what's really responsible for that level of procreation in Nigeria? What will the analysis be, and how can we prevent or slow it down, or whatever it is? What do you think? And what's the death rate? I don't want to sound morbid, but I mean, growth is birth minus death. Is there a corresponding death rate in Nigeria, and so on and so forth? Or how do we slow down or arrest this population growth?
Officially, what the Bureau of Statistics tells us regarding death rates is that our death rate is significantly faster than our death rates. We are currently using a net birth rate of about 2.8%, which is births less death gives us a 2.8% population growth rate. So clearly we're having more babies than people are passing. But what we also know is that a lot of Nigerians that are, as we evolve and we are growing older, a lot of Nigerians are also not getting to those the dream age of 70. So currently, you'll be amazed to learn that less than 15% of Nigerians cross the 70-year-old mark. Less than 15% of Nigerians make it to 70. So we're giving birth to, the summary is we're giving birth to a lot of children. However, as they grow, they are not really surviving to go into their prime age of adulthood. That's one. The second, sir, is that we carefully looked at why is Nigeria growing at such an alarming rate, to find out the real reasons and to find out more about how it's shocking. Again, these are all the numbers that are available, numbers from the World Bank, from the IMF, and from our own National Library and National Bureau of Statistics. Again, a good reference point is always independence, 1960. And so we looked at what happened in China between 1960, what has happened in China in the last 62 years, 1960 to date. Their population has grown, figured out. We looked at the United Kingdom between 1960, when Nigeria gained independence, and today, their population has grown by just 30%. We looked at the US, 1960 to 2022, their population growth rate, 85%. We then carefully looked at not just Nigeria, all the West Africa, all the countries surrounding Nigeria, so Benin, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon. And what we saw was shocking. Each of the countries that I've mentioned, within that same period, their population has grown by an excess of 400%. You heard that right. So between 1960 to 2022, the population of Benin Republic has grown by over 400%. Same thing with Niger, same thing with Chad, same thing with Cameroon, over 400%. However, if we look at those other countries we talked about, Nigeria percent, if you look at the numbers, 45 million to what 45 billion Nigeria's population in 1960 to what it is today, approximately 400%. That same bracket with our neighboring countries. So clearly, it is the population problem is not just a Nigerian problem. It seems to be a problem across even countries that are around our borders. And so it makes us ask the next question, that what is peculiar to this situation? And we find that not only do we have a high birth rate across us, there's a high poverty rate across us, and there's a high unemployment rate across us, and there's a high illiteracy rate across us. So clearly, we cannot solve the birth problem without solving illiteracy, poverty, and unemployment.
Very, very interesting. Very, very, very interesting. So it's I've learned that it's more almost a West African Malay at this point in time. So there must be something in that environment, in that area, that makes people procreate so much. And also, like you said, not just procreate, but also increase the level of poverty all over the place. So I know at the conference you did say that you were a man who provided information and you didn't really you didn't want to involve yourself. I don't know how you phrased it too much in solutions, but what we're trying to do on this platform is really to find solutions. So if you're advisor to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu right now, what would you be telling him? And what kind of policies would you be asking him to bear in mind, considering that we have the greatest out-of-school children in the world right now, proportionately, I believe. We have what you call the poverty center of the world. We have the one of the most corrupt countries. They say we're right there behind Afghanistan. They say we're also the greatest praying country in the world, also behind Afghanistan. Worst infrastructure development indices, lack of strong institutions, most corrupt judicial system, most corrupt policing system in the world, very difficult in doing business, lack of transparency in governance. We seem to tick all the bad boxes. What would you be advising the president right now? Before I ask you another leading question.
If I had the answer to that question, I probably would be selling it for a whole lot of money, sir. But one of the things that is important that we consider as a solution is we now need to come more than ever before. We need to create an incentive for families not to have for families that choose to put a cap on the number of children they want to have, and we need to have a disincentive for families that want to have, say, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 children. One way is to include a tax. Part of the tax reforms that the government is currently doing should include being able to give a reward to families that choose to sign up to a program to minimize the number of children they will have, especially for new couples. There's nothing we can do right now to the 210 million children that we have. So 210 million population that we have. That is here to stay. And those numbers will keep growing. What we can do is to slow down the growth rates. And so one of the ways we can slow down the growth rate is to focus on new families, not families. So we're looking at the younger demographic. There's nothing we can do to move from 210 million to 150 million or 160 or 80 million. What we can do is slow it down. And to slow it down, that conversation is not going to be happening with the 50-year-olds or the 60 or the 70 or the 80-year-olds. Those are not part of, they can no longer be part of the conversations. They might have been part of the problem, but they can't be part of the conversations because they are not having babies anymore. The 60-year-olds females are not having babies anymore, the males. Those that are having the babies are where we need to take the solutions to. And we need to be able to let them understand that there is an incentive if you choose to keep a cap on the number of children you have. If, however, you have beyond, say, 4 children, 3 children, then your your personal income tax rate or your tax bracket will change, which means you will pay more taxes. And then so we need to sit down and create a reform that allows people to understand that if, as a young family, you choose to have more children, then yes, you can. The government will not stop you. However, these are the things that it will cost you, especially financially. And if you choose to have a smaller size family, these are the benefits that you'll get as a government. As of today, no such system or no such incentive exists at the local, state, or federal government level. What we have is family planning discussions, and if we look at, even if we look at the data, the government needs to sit down and look at how effective have these family planning methods really been to our population. We are not saying that it hasn't been effective. What we're saying is that if we rigorously examine the data, the family planning results have not been what we desire.
Okay. So what does the future then portend for us in Nigeria if we keep going at the rate that we're growing without checking it and without putting in place systems that would better harness the country and provide a more thriving economy? Where do you think we'll be in 20 years' time in terms of statistics, growth, economic development, security, even based on the fact that quite a number of people might be on or underemployed, and therefore they would probably take the laws in their own hands? Where do you think we'll be going as a nation?
The nation, we need to look at how it all connects, and that's very important. What we've seen first is the government isn't using data sufficiently. And for a very few of them that use data, they are not using data extensively. So one of the things we've done is to look at and to identify some trends and some correlations. And what we've seen is that as of today, the top 10 countries that have the most population, 6 out of 10 of these countries are the same countries that have the highest numbers of out-of-school children. So what we see is a strong relationship between population, the strength of your population, and the number of out-of-school children. 6 out of the 10 countries in the world that have the highest population find themselves in a situation where they also have the highest number of out-of-school children. And I'm talking about India, Nigeria, Pakistan, China, Indonesia, and Bangladesh. These six countries I've mentioned are also on that list of the 10 most populated countries in the world. However, China finds itself on that list. However, we're seeing improved prosperity in China. So China is on that list, yes, clearly because it has over 1 billion population. But if we look at the peculiarities of China, as we speak, Nigeria has a population of 210 million, 10 million. Out-of-school children, those that are between the age of 6 to 18 that should be in school that are not in school, 21 million. China, 12 million. And so China's ratio of out-of-school children relative to its population is quite low. A population of in excess of 1 billion people, 12 million out-of-school children. Nigeria, a population of 200 million people, approximately 10%, 1 out of 10 is out of school. And why has China been able to significantly reduce its out-of-school children concentration is because over the years, its leadership system has been consistent. Their style of governance has been consistent. Their outlook has been aligned with how their hierarchy sees it. And so they've had a plan, they've had foresight, and going through their history, we've seen decade on decade, China has improved. And that's why even the United States as of today is currently in a cold war with China. And I'll explain why that is happening, because the United States as well is looking at the data. It seems that it's the less developed countries, especially Nigeria being the largest Black race in Africa, isn't aggressively looking at the data. One of the reasons why the United States is bothered is as at 1960, the United States then controlled 39% of the world economy. In simple terms, as at 1960, the world economy as measured by GDP, $1.3 trillion. The United States accounted for 39% of that. Today, the United States accounts for only 25% of the world economy. So yes, the United States still has the largest share of the world economy, but the United States also understands that if these trends continue, they will no longer hold the large chunk of the world economy because their market share as well is dwindling. And so we've seen a deliberate attempt by their governments, by their institutions, to do all they can to keep growing, to do all they can to keep supporting IT, to do all they can to keep trying to lead in innovation, because they see that their relevance on the global stage is weakening. And China, in the last 6 decades, has significantly gotten stronger. However, Nigeria has remained in the same place in the last 6 decades. And I'll emphasize that once again because of the importance of this. In 1960, the year Nigeria gained independence, Nigeria's size of the economy, 0.3%, not up to not even up to 1%, 0.3%. More than 6 decades after, we are still at the same place, 0.5%. And anyone that understands numbers knows that there's really no difference between scoring 0.3% and scoring 0.5%. You are still at the same place, despite your population growing. In simple terms, Nigeria has not been able to do anything with its population. That's the hard truth. Nigeria has not been able to optimize or get any significant, we can't even say Nigeria hasn't gotten any significant benefits. Looking at the numbers, Nigeria's population growth has not assisted in any way to grow its relevance on the global stage.
This is not very good news. This is not good news at all, Babajide, not good news at all. And what's even more frightening is that those who seem to be at the helm of affairs, either they don't have this information or they don't care. Well, it's a new government, no doubt, but it's the same political party. So quite a lot of their actors should still be in the work somewhere and so on and so forth. They don't even seem to really pay all these things any attention at all. And that's very, very frightening for us in Nigeria. Is there a citizen's response? Okay, the government has not quite done what it's supposed to do. What can the citizens do? What can people like you and myself do? What can we do on the ALG platform, for example, to try and ameliorate this situation or do something about it? Is there anything that the average citizen can do?
That's a tough one. What platforms like this have done is to make such conversations to be heard, increase the speed at which and the urgency at which government institutions should attend to these issues. What we've also seen is some non-governmental institutions and corporate organizations try to manage some of the symptoms of the population growth. And so out-of-school children is one of the symptoms of population growth. The high unemployment rates are part of the symptoms. High poverty rates, high illiteracy rates are part of the symptoms. But over these decades since independence, we focused largely on the symptoms without treating the disease. And so it seems that the symptoms are not being cured. We focused on, it's understandable, out of school children is a symptom, unemployment, illiteracy, crime, terrorism. They are all symptoms of a larger problem. But one of the reasons why the government seems to be avoiding the larger problem and the causes is because of religion. And it hasn't been able to find a way to clearly manage and create a policy to inhibit families from having children. So how do we, the role of religion clearly is there. And so the government just turns its eye. And that's why we've said we're now at a point where while the government might not be able to force families to not have children, the government now can create incentives and disincentives to childbirth. That is the solution that we need to focus on right now. Incentives and disincentives to new childbirth. New childbirth.
Okay, excellent. We've learned quite a lot today. I see my brother Charles is trying to ask a few questions. And I know a few people may have a few questions, and there might be one or two people who want to make a contribution or add the quota to this conversation. So I'm going to be opening up the space right now, and I'm going to be asking either Sonny or Jumoke to try and coordinate this aspect of it, and have people ask questions. So the future doesn't look too strong if we're not able to manage our population and manage the relevant data that we need to do, and so on and so forth. Citizen response, not too much we can do, but continue to generate and create the information that is needed to put government under pressure. But before, let me take my last question, and it's going to be a bit on the off-the-beat question. And if it puts you on the spot, I apologize, and I don't quite apologize, but I'd like a response from you. If you wish to pass, I would not stop you from passing. But my question is this. I think we've come back again to that elephant in the room, and that's leadership in Nigeria. A leadership who over the years have not paid attention to changing trends, have not paid attention to statistics, have not paid attention to the cry and the needs of their people. What sort of thing can Nigerians do? Or is there any possibility at all of effecting and putting in place some kind of leadership that will listen and begin to point Nigeria in the right direction? Is there anything, advice that you can give to Nigerians, the average Nigerian? What can he do to make this happen? I think you are muted. I think you are muted.
I'm not.
Oh, okay. Now you are not. Go ahead, please. We couldn't hear you. Okay, we can hear you now.
My first advice to Nigerians, to families, will be two words: do good. I think if everyone is able to do good and try to do good wherever you find yourself, be a do-good apostle. And I'm not using that word apostle to mean any I'm not using it with a religious stain. Everyone needs to do good. If we have more people doing good than people not doing anything at all, or people doing bad, we will make it. At the moment, we have not just a problem in the public sector, there's a crisis in the private sector. So leadership at public institutions is below what the people expect. But leadership across several private institutions as well is below what people expect. And so it all starts with everyone taking responsibility and trying to do good. If more people do good, then it encourages more people to even do better. In all, it is unlikely that Nigeria significantly makes a detour in the next 5 to 10 years. It is significantly unlikely. What is more likely, with deliberate determination and discipline, is to stabilize things in preparation for prosperity. And so the government needs to, first of all, focus on stabilizing the environment in preparation for prosperity. But what it seems the government is talking about right now is prosperity, without understanding that the situation we find ourselves cannot yield prosperity. We need to prepare an environment for prosperity, but prosperity is not anywhere near us right now. Is not anywhere near us right now. We talked about how China has been able to grow their economy from 4.3% in 1960 in terms of their share of the world economy, 4.3% to what it is today, looking at 20%, 18%. Nigeria is not even where China was in 1960. And if there are only two numbers people need to remember here, are those two numbers I've talked about, 0.3% and 0.5%. 0.3% Nigeria's market share of the world in 1960. And in more than 6 decades, we're still at 0.5%. We didn't even double. We didn't move from 0.3% to 0.6%. And this is another economy that is holding 18% now. So we need to realize that beyond us, we mustn't find ourselves in a situation where when we are gone in another 6 decades, some other persons and group are holding this forum and they are talking about, which is in the year 2083, another 60 years. And we're talking about why is Nigeria at 0.9%. And that is the trend. If we've moved from 0.3 to 0.6%, 0.5% in 60 years, it means in under 60 years, going by how we are moving, and we'll probably be just at 0.9, less than 1% in 2083.
Wow.
The government needs to have a target. And over time, what we've seen is the government has not been purposeful in using numbers to have targets. What is the target for, and the target has to be backed by a plan. What is the target for growth? What sort of market share do we want in under 10 years, in every 10 years, in a decade? Who is responsible and what are the penalties for institutions not meeting these targets? Everything comes down to numbers. Everything comes down to numbers. And if we're not a government of numbers, then our days will be numbered.
Interesting. That's a nice point. If we're not a government of numbers, then our days will be numbered. And everything comes down to numbers. Thank you very much. Let's open the floor for questions and answers. We'll take the first four. Let me trouble you to note them, and you'll answer all of them together. If we're not driven by numbers, then our days will be numbered. So there's a Charles, there's a comrade Frederick, Helen Essien, and Auntie Professor Mrs. Nika Grange. We'll take those four questions very quickly, and then I'll ask Jumoke or Sonny to please coordinate the Q&A. Thank you very much. God bless you. Charles, unmute yourself and let's hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Babajide, thank you very much for such a wonderful insight. I have few comments. Number one, I believe in the numbers, but I believe in numbers when the numbers are totally built down. You've mentioned severally that Nigerian population is high, is growing higher, but I never heard you actually drill it down. We are growing. In what region? If you go to the region, and what is the average growth rate in that region? And what are the reasons why that region is really growing more than the other regions in Nigeria? And can you compare or correlate them to other countries where they share the same values, religion, culture, and see if is Nigeria higher than Qatar? Is the northern part of Nigeria, the growth rate, is it higher than Dubai? Is it higher than Emirates? Is it higher than Kuwait? Is it higher than Egypt? So we need to really drill it down. That's only when we can actually find a lasting solution to it. That's the first part of my comment. The second part is you mentioned that we are surrounded by countries that are actually going at 400%. What percentage of migration from these countries that come to Nigeria are actually part of our total representation of our growth rate now? Because I believe they all come to Nigeria. So what percentage yearly do we get from all these countries that are growing at 400%? What is the percentage that comes to Nigeria? I did not hear you mention that. I think we need to know that also. Then lastly, when you talk about unemployment and how this affects the economy, I think we need to know actually where the lack of education is really biting hard. I can say for a fact, in the West, parents actually suffer themselves to put their kids to school. But we know a lot of things have been done for the Almanjiris, and we have never been able to book success. So we are not the only Islamic populated country. So how come that other Islamic populated countries are able to manage their children to go to school and become educated? Why are we dwindling in that? What are the reasons and the factors? So these are just my mind-boggling comments. I really love your presentation, but I think we need to drill down to the right spot so that we can really understand what the core challenges are, and then we should offer not the general solution, but the Nigerian solution to this. We must confront ourselves. If regionally, let's confront ourselves that we are not doing well in some regions, and it's getting worse. And finally, I think it's high time collectively we have to start putting some measures. This Omodo, house girl, house boy thing is so huge. If you put the population of house girl or domesticated servants that are not going to school, we, the people that take them, we will never put our children through that kind of a path. So we are actually making things worse for our children and the future generation of Nigeria by having house girls, house boys, and we don't send them to school also. So those are my few comments. Thank you very much. God bless everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's keep our comments short and sharp, please, so that we can take as many as we can. Please note those comments, Babajide, Comrade Frederick, and short and sharp, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. The topic is, how did Nigeria become the poverty capital of the world? My response is that the silence of Nigerians to bad governance since 1960 made us to become the poverty capital of the world. We tolerate what we can terminate as a people. What we experience in Nigeria today, some countries like South Africa will never accept it. That silence where a few persons will just inflate our budget, they duplicate the budget, and the people are quiet. That silence where a senator will buy an SUV for 160 million naira, meaning that a senator that has been in the National Assembly since 1999 has received 6 vehicles. They leave office and they steal public property and they tell us that they're selling it to themselves. That silence where Tinubu will begin to allocate so much money for vehicles, meaning that Buhari and his wife left with our vehicles, and we, the people, we are silent. A country that is borrowing to pay her debts, and we are silent. So these are cumulative effects of the silence of Nigerians. A government where we don't have first lady in the Nigerian constitution, but we are budgeting 1.5 billion to buy vehicles for the first lady, and Nigerians are quiet. These are very serious issues. A president wants to buy a yacht for 5 billion, but budgets 5.5 billion naira for student loan, and the people are silent. So this, when you have a situation of now, so we see now what we go do now, as long as we continue in that level, many people will continue to sing on your mandate we shall stand. Even the ones that are dying, they are singing on your mandate we shall stand. Why is it that the northern Nigeria, that used to be very rich, today has over 80% of poor people, the killing, the kidnapping going on? Many of them, they will not say anything. All they are after, okay, some of them are after, is power. North, South, Christian, Muslims. They now allow politicians to divide us along religious and ethnic line. So, in conclusion, the Nigeria of today is in a sorry state, and it will be very pathetic for us to bequeath today's Nigeria onto our children. It will be very unfair. The conclusion of this is that elections of 2023 has shown that election will not save us in Nigeria. That they are singing on your mandate we shall stand will not save us in Nigeria. What we, the people, need to do is to take back our country through massive revolution, non-violent revolution.
Thank you.
How can you have 200 million people in Nigeria and you cannot have 1 million people on the street? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Radical, but that is what we need. Thank you.
I understand your passion for Nigeria, and it's very refreshing. Thank you for those comments. Can we have Mommy Grange, please? Go ahead. Go ahead, ma.
You missed out, Aline. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was so refreshing to listen to the presenter talk about data. I don't think many people realize that we actually do collect data in Nigeria. Every 4 years, we have what we call demographic and health socioeconomic data. They are there, but they are never used. That is the problem. It's not so much that we don't have data, but we are so, we just ignore them. We actually pay a lot of money to collect data, but we don't use them. So then we go on to planning. We do plan 5-year plan, rolling plans, but they are never followed. The present government, if you ask them, they have a plan, probably, but they are not following their plan. And on their plan, they obviously did not put there that they were going to buy so many jeeps, etc., and all that. Because if they had, we probably would not have elected them. So, there are plans for elections, but plans, are never followed. Okay, having said that, you mentioned China. China had to instill discipline into their people. And that discipline started with their government. Their government, have you ever heard of China, a Chinese leader using a vehicle that they don't produce? No. Likewise, India changed over the last 40 years by just sticking to the kind of cars that they produce. They never imported. And then they went on to produce so many other things, and they now are, becoming self-sufficient in managing their healthcare delivery services. And that's what has made their hospital services so attractive to those who want to go there. Okay, so discipline within the electorate, discipline of the executive. In China, it is the executive, because really, theirs is like an autocratic government. But there are democratic governments that have rule of law, and the rule of law is kept to strictly. Otherwise, you find yourself in jail. So if you choose democracy, you must have your rule of law, which you must stick to. Okay. This is about politics. Now, let me move on to socio-cultural. Socio-cultural, we have found that we need to look at what is happening to our women, girls. Girls are being married off at the age of 12, 13. From 13 to 15 years, they can have so many children, So don't just talk about families. It is the girls themselves. And if you look at regionally, if you look at our regions, the reason the fecundity in the south is less than in the north is because the girls have become educated and they do not get married till later. They do not produce till later. So the girl child needs to be specially cultured so that they do accept the values that will make them not just want to become wives and mothers. They need to know that, they also have their own self, their dignity, which is not happening. But if you compare South with North, you will see the difference. Somebody who has been trying to say, well, how do we go, what's happening? Because those in the Islamic countries, they are doing well and all that. Fine, maybe they have realized that even if they are having 2 or 3 wives, they need to give, they need to transfer or allow those wives to have their own dignity. Without the dignity of the woman is just used as a child production channel.
Thank you.
So Mom, can I ask you to please round up, if you don't mind, so that we have about 4 hands up?
All right, my dear. No, you got me onto my pet subject. That's the problem.
I
So
know
anyway,
when it comes to
yes, yes. So I do realize now. Just the last thing I want to say is that not if we are growing at a faster rate than we are losing our people, which is happening. I mean, the birth rate and death rate are widely apart, and starting from childhood, there's a high mortality rate, and those of us in medicine, we have you know paid more attention to the mortality rate, etc. But we also paid attention to the birth rate in that we wanted family planning. So they need to be looked at simultaneously and brought closer together using those those suggestions that I've made about the girl child. So thank you very much. There's a lot more to be said because as we grow more, the services cannot go around them. So you get less and less quality of services, and the quality of the people diminishes. Quality of people. That is the problem with nation building. If you are not building the nation, good quality people, then we are on the wrong path. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma. So the next person is Mrs. Adetula. Sister Helen, sorry, we'll call you the next set. I believe Mrs. Adetula's hand was up before yours.
Thank you very much, Jumoke, for putting me back on the right path. Most of my questions have been asked by Charles, so I have just one. Thank you, Mr. Ogunsanwo, but what about the nexus between high population, regional and sub-regional conflict when it comes to land grabbing? That is my question. The next one is just a comment. Our public officials need an urgent orientation on importance of data collection as well as the use in planning. Most, if not all, do not know the importance at all. They regard it as waste of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ma. Mr. Ogunsanwo, can you please answer those 4 questions and then we'll take the next set?
Thank you. I'll start from Mrs. Adesola's last question, which is the nexus between the high population, regional conflict, land grabbing. That exists, especially across the borders. We've seen a lot of inter-tribal marriages. We've also seen that not even just across the international borders, within the local borders, cross-cultural marriages. And because there are very few states, and I emphasize few states that have detailed land registry. You have issues whereby over decades, land has been handed over from family to family without documents, and people have been buried in their houses. Great-grandparents have been buried in their houses as a sign of land ownership. And so we've seen a lot of land transfer over decades without documentation. And so that has also created a lot of conflicts. Sometimes we've seen the situations whereby the state government doesn't want to be firm so as to not to escalate the crisis. But the lesson shows that actions have to be taken. Land registries have to evolve beyond the state they are currently at. When it comes, I'll also like to follow up on that with the great suggestions as well from Mommy Grange on the availability of data. One major thing we've seen is over the years, the National Bureau of Statistics, yes, has helped with providing some demographic household surveys, which they do, yes, over the years, looking at where we're coming from. But the information is still insufficient. It even gets worse when we look at the State Bureau of Statistics. We do not have the states generating sufficient data to even assist the governance of the states. Today we talk about Nigeria's gross domestic product, but as we speak, more states do not have their own economic figures. So how do you plan an economy when you do not know the constituent? Or how do you plan a state when you do not know what exactly is going on in terms of economic activity in your state? So what we keep seeing is the National Bureau of Statistics, yes, will release reports on the size of the economy, the national size of the economy based on samples it has done. But we do not have the states taking even more responsibility to do research, to conduct surveys that will assist in planning. One thing we've seen, however, still on Mommy Green's discussion, is one number that we have consistently found that the states and the federal government is interested in, and that number is in that word called budget. When it comes to budget, everybody is interested in numbers, and because it is all about spending money and making money. But when it comes to other key relevant social indicators, economic planning indicators, growth indicators, welfare indicators, you don't have that level of conversation coming up. The greatest conversation we have in Nigeria with respect to numbers is on budget, federal government budget. Where's the money going to? Who is having the money? Who is getting the contract? Who is appropriating? It's all the budget. So it also lets us understand the significance of the challenge. Mommy Green emphasized on the girl child and the role the girl child plays in managing the population explosion crisis. That is extremely correct. A lot of young girls, especially girls living in northern Nigeria, are given off as gifts, early child marriage. They start having children very early. And then those children also cannot be taken care of. And those children now are now classified as out of school children. And some of those children get on to also so it's a cycle. Those children then get married as well, and it leads to more crime. So we're in a cycle that hasn't been taken seriously. Comrade Frederick shared a lot of passion on his comments on nonviolent extremism, on nonviolent revolution as perhaps the surest way to go. But what we also, while I wouldn't comment directly on that, one thing I would also mention is we've seen a failure in family values. And that has led to young men and women growing up with this appetite for greed, with this appetite to think of self first rather than of country first. So while some have an eye on non-violent revolution as a way, we need to play our part in improving the values, the morals of children as they grow. What we've seen is over time, the quality of upbringing of children, the role parents play. We've seen more or less, we call it a failure of parenting. So a failure of governance cannot be disassociated from a failure of parenting. Mr. Charles talked about drilling down into the numbers. Oh yes, but because this platform isn't the platform to drill down into the numbers, not everybody on this platform is in love with only numbers. So we have to make it easy to relate with. Part of the challenges we face with our population is the last population census was done in 2006. And then the figure was 140 million. The figures that the Bureau of Statistics uses now, that the World Bank uses right now, is 220 million. In simple terms, what we're looking at is that between when the last census was done in 2006 to where we are as of today, we have an additional net birth of 70 million. Now, another challenge is the dichotomy between the North and the South, and I would like to end on that note with this set of questions. Nigeria, yes, is a country on a path to becoming a nation. Some already feel that Nigeria is a nation. We're not going to have that debate right now. But what the numbers clearly shows is that Northern Nigeria is significantly different from Southern Nigeria. Not only is Northern Nigeria significantly different from Southern Nigeria, the peculiarities of Northern Nigeria itself makes us look at it as a different country from Southern Nigeria. And I'll point to two numbers that shows this. Sometime 2 weeks ago, the Bureau of Statistics released the numbers on how much the states have generated from their own means, which is persons paying tax, their road taxes, their other taxes they've been able to generate amongst themselves. And the total figure for all the 36 states, that is internally generated revenue, we hear that a lot, revenue generated by the states based on their own efforts, 1.9 trillion naira for 2022. But that isn't the number to focus on. The number to focus on is on how much of that 1.9 trillion naira was generated by states in Northern Nigeria and how much was generated by states in Southern Nigeria. Allows us to clearly see that we are two different countries operating with two different challenges and opportunities. From the Bureau of Statistics, they say that 78%, that's approximately 80% of that money was generated by states in Southern Nigeria. You heard that right. 80% of all the money generated by Nigerian states, 80% of that money from Southern Nigeria. The challenge is that was the same figure even way back as a decade ago, 2 decades ago. So in other words, not only is Nigeria not making progress on the global stage in terms of being able to leverage on our population growth to increase our relevance on the global sphere, within ourselves, we clearly are remaining the same. And so if Southern Nigerian states generates 80% of the revenue, and Northern Nigerian state generates only 20% of the revenue, and that was about approximately the same situation 10 years ago. The question is, what will the next 10, 20 years look like? What will the next 30 years look like? So clearly the situation in the North in terms of them exploring or exploiting their opportunities has remained the same. Nothing has changed between the last 10 years in terms of opportunity maximization or opportunity growth across Nigeria's 19 northern states. The challenge is Northern Nigeria represents where majority of Nigerians live based on the last census. Northern Nigeria represents where 80% of Nigeria's land is. So when we're talking about Northern Nigeria and Southern Nigeria, Nigeria is actually more northern in terms of land area. Northern Nigeria represents 80% of Nigeria's land area. And so what it points to us is that we are not maximizing our human resources, neither are we maximizing our agricultural resources, neither are we maximizing our other resources available within our environment.
Thank you. Are you ready for the next set of questions?
Yes.
Okay, let me try to mute. There's background noise coming from Faye. Please, can you mute all background noise, please? Thank you. I'm going to call on Mrs. Essien. Auntie Adesua, please mute yourself.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you
evening.
very much, Mr. Winston, for your very interesting talk this evening. I was looking forward to you having baby dolls or something to use in illustrating your talk as usual. But thank you very much. I want to think differently, and I'm sure a lot of people will not agree with me, but these are my thoughts. First of all, I want to say that culture and religion is basically the bane of the fertility growth rate in Nigeria. If we can address those two issues, then we're on our way to solving our fertility growth rate in Nigeria. Now, why do I say this? Let's look at leaders, for instance. We see that in Northern Governor feels that the best thing he can do for his people is to organize a parade of brides, and men come out and do like point and kill and pick the ones they want, and they get married to the government, you know, organizes, pays all expenses paid plus a bed for the people. And these people are going to have babies, and the population keeps growing in the north. So we see, how do the leaders, and even the leaders themselves, you see, we hear members of the Senate, senators congratulating their members for having up to 100 children, marrying more wives. And I mean, no matter how much we try to ignore it, the people are what they are because our leaders are not what they should be. The leaders have not shown good examples. You cannot have a leader who is having more than 50 children, and then you're telling the people to have less than the number that you have. You have to lead by example, and this is not happening in our country at the moment. The leaders are the ones having many children, so the poor people think they can go ahead, even though there's a penalty. I mean, there's a punishment for it because they can't take care of their children. So now let's talk about even the data you're talking about. I'm all for data. I believe that data is more reliable than assumptions. So I believe in data. But how do you come about this data? We've been talking about this population for as long as I've been on Earth. We keep talking about, oh, the number is this, our population is this. How do we come about this population, the number that we use? Most of the time we hear a lot of people saying how, the population was arrived at by dubious means. And we see this happening during the elections. The number of people who came out were not the numbers that we thought we actually had. So that begins to put a question mark on the actual number of this population that we keep touting and saying 200 million. Are we really 200 million? That's in one corner. Now let's even assuming without conceding that we are 200 million. Are you trying to tell me that there's nothing positive that we can get from having a large population? Okay, if you don't think so, let me tell you what I think the positive things are and which we can leverage on. Gen Zs are not even thinking of having a lot of children. If you talk to a lot of Gen Zs, they don't even want to get married, not talk of even having children. I don't think that this problem, perceived problem, is going to last for a long time. To get to a point where a lot of Nigerians won't even want to have that many children. So I think it's just what we have now, what people, probably my generation, used to engage in, having a lot of children. With time, a lot of people won't be having children. But let's take advantage of the situation we have now. Look at what is happening now. A lot of Nigerians
do you mind rounding up in a few seconds, please? Because
yes,
we have about 3 more hands up, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
A lot of people are jackpying. If we didn't have the population we have, would we be able to jackpot and still be able to run our country? People are poaching on our people because we have the population. We have a lot of educated people. They don't have. We have a lot of young people, which we should be leveraging on. We're not. We're complaining that our population is too much. We should be leveraging on the fact that we have a lot of young people. We're not doing that. So I think that we should not really think that our population is a problem. We can leverage, we can take advantage of our population and make good use of it. So this is my own, opinion.
That's a good perspective. Thank you so much. May I have Juliet ask your question?
Okay. Good evening, Chimoke.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. The President, doing a good job as usual. Please, my question is, we're talking about fertility rate, the growth, the population, the hike. There is a denomination that I know, they don't believe in family planning. As far as they're concerned, continue to give birth as God gives. Please, how can you help to educate this type of people with this mindset on how to curb this issue of fertility rate? Again, some people that are living in a room apartment, how would you help them? Because these are one of the causes. You enumerated some of the reasons, and I have it here. The reason for this fertility rate in Nigeria. So how do you help such people, some denominations, and those that are living in a room apartment? Thank you. Well done.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call Uncle Afolabi because he had his hand up. I don't know. It seems like the lineup is a bit skewed. So please go ahead, Uncle Afolabi. Apologies.
Good evening. No problem. Good evening, everyone. My question is actually away from population. It's more on data. You have said that our contribution on the world economy was 0.5 before now. Do you have any data at all on our economic growth since this administration came in, and compared to the economic growth of the last 8 years? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take Letitia. That would be the, I believe, fourth.
Yes. Hello. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Letitia. I'm currently in Louisiana. I'm happy to be here. Many thanks to Pastor Itwa Igodalo for organizing this session today. So mine really is not a question. It is more of a statement in several parts. I'm currently at the University of Oxford studying artificial intelligence. So about population growth in Nigeria, as Helen just mentioned, a lot of people are leaving the shores of Nigeria. Other countries are poaching on our people. And so it may not be a bad thing that we have this population growth. We need replacements of the minds and the people that are leaving. But there are different ways that we could utilize or leverage artificial intelligence in our current population growth. And we can talk about that later. And I'd actually like to be invited to talk about artificial intelligence on this platform at some point. But there are different ways that we could utilize artificial intelligence in managing our current population. And a lot of it has to deal with data. Actually, as this was going on, I invited one of my colleagues and one of my new partners, Franca, to come onto this platform now. She deals with data. We have to figure out how to utilize our data, manage our data effectively, and use it for our benefit. So that's one thing. We need to get people to actually know how to utilize data. And she and I are actually presenting on demystifying artificial intelligence and data analytics, November 17th and 18th. If you're interested, link up with me on LinkedIn, Letitia B, Leticia B, and we can talk some more about that. So that's my comment. It's not really a question, but Babajide, you can address it and maybe talk about how we could utilize artificial intelligence in managing our current population growth. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to take those set and then we'll take the last two? We have just two more hands up. Mr. Babajide. Okay, please go ahead.
Let's talk about culture and religion, especially the events that played out some weeks back, the mass wedding. Again, it's a another confirmation that were two countries living together as one. Yeah, there are two countries living together as one. Cultures are different, significantly different from the north to the south, ways of life, perspectives, and there's perhaps nothing wrong with two countries living as one if we've been able to find a way to live and to profit, to make cohabiting productive. That hasn't happened, and it's not necessarily a case of the north bringing out the south or the south not bringing up the north. It is a case of the north hasn't been able to exploit its advantages, and the south hasn't also been able to exploit its advantages. Today, yes, we understand that significantly most of the out-of-school children challenges, the illiteracy challenges, the terrorism challenges are in the north, and a lot of this are correlated events. But we shouldn't just blame the north, because the south has challenges that no one is really focusing about. And I'll talk about some of the peculiarities of the south. In Nigeria today, based on the report from the Bureau of Statistics, approximately 85% of all products that are imported into Nigeria comes through Lagos and Port Harcourt. So what is happening is, and most of these products that are imported come through Lagos and Port Harcourt. Some of them get to the north, but majority stay in the south. And so what has happened is, over decades, the south has led to the collapse of the manufacturing industry in Nigeria. The south is a highly consumption-driven region of Nigeria. The southern Nigeria isn't producing. Southern Nigeria is consuming, and families living in southern Nigeria are importing from other countries, creating jobs and giving jobs to other countries. The product comes through Lagos, the product comes through river, food items, imported items, luxury items, and a lot of these items stays in the southern region. And so the challenge is, manufacturing in the south has largely declined because of the culture and the lifestyle of millions of families living in southern Nigeria. So part of the effect we are seeing on the dollar, Nigeria is consuming. And so the southern region of the country hasn't also been able to optimize its position as being relatively more educated, relatively being more productive to the situation we find ourselves. And regarding Nigeria's population, accuracy of population numbers, still on Mrs. Essen's question, 200 million. Sometimes there's meant to be a next census where which has been delayed for several reasons. A lot of bodies have relied on looking at what our historical population growth rate has been between 2006, when the last census was done, and previous years to find out an average. And then we've also we use the identity card numbers as a proxy. We use the election numbers as a proxy. We use geo images, satellite images to look at population density. And so when the next census will be done, it will be highly abnormal for that report to come out and say Nigeria's population is below 200 million. What we might see is a plus or minus 10% from what the estimates are currently. But what it will also give us is we'll also get more information about the family size, excuse me, and other information that the surveys, the questionnaire is expected to, other information the questionnaires are expected to provide us. Mrs. Juliet talked about the fertility rates and the challenges that the nation has. Again, the North has its challenges, has its peculiarities. The data shows that, which I talked about, the South has its peculiarities, its peculiar challenges. But there's a school that, so some reasons why families, and especially low-income families in the North, have a higher family size is not necessarily irrational. And there are some reasons why they do this, and some research has shown that first is in northern Nigeria, the mortality rates is significantly higher than the infant mortality rate is significantly higher than southern Nigeria. So the chances that a child will survive at birth in the North is lower. And so what happens is when a family has a child, or when a woman has a child, she wants to have more children so that the odds still favor her. So she could have 10 children, knowing that 3 or 4 or 5 may not survive. So she ends up with 4 or 5 that survive. So because the odds are against majority of them, for them, the irrational option is have more, and then it's like doubling down, having more children, so that if you lose and some of these children don't make it, you still have like 3 or 4. So one is for survival. The second is it's some sort of insurance for old age. With the thinking that the more children you have, the likely that you will also be better taken care of as you get older than if you only had one poor child, or if you had only 2 poor children. If you have 7 or 8 poor children, you are likely going to get a better old age care than having only 1 or 2 poor children. Another reason why is to get more hands to work on the farm, to get more hands to help with labor. And so society needs to also understand that the childbearing patterns of the North are not necessarily because they are irrational decisions. Like I explained, there's a thinking, there's a science behind what we will term this madness. There's some logic to why some families in the North have several children. Then Uncle talked about our economic growth rates compared to what it was before. In 2003 to 2004, Nigeria is on record to have grown by as much as 10% per annum. Those were the boom days. So we've achieved double-digit growth rates in the economy before. Under the last administration, looking at 2015 to 2022, based on the facts as measured by the real economic growth rate, real GDP, the fastest the economy grew was 3%. In most times, for a country that grows at a net population growth rate of 3 to 3.5%, it simply means that our standard and quality of living for families is really not getting better. Recently, the World Bank says Nigeria is expected to grow by 2.9% this year. We're currently still growing by 2.5%. So these numbers are not numbers that any government wants to be proud of. The president in his inaugural speech was hoping to achieve, said that he has a target of 6% GDP per annum. Professionals have looked at that and said that is highly unlikely based on the way the economy is currently structured. But the sort of growth numbers that can take Nigeria to the promised land at 10% growth rate per annum, 12%, 15%. We need to be having those sort of growth numbers for like 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And if those numbers come down, then we should be looking at 8%, 7%. 4% isn't going to get us to the promised land. We are not even going at 4%. We're going at 2.53%. And based on the situation of the economy right now, rising cost of living, families not having incomes to spend, it is unlikely that our growth rate within the next 4 years would average more than 3.5% per annum. And that is bad news. Letitia from Louisiana University of Oxford. AI seems to play a bigger role in developed economies than underdeveloped economies or developing economies like Nigeria. AI needs a platform for it to be AI. There's a base for AI to be optimized, and developed economies do not have that base. It's like the Concorde airplane. You need to have the airport infrastructure for you to accommodate the plane. Nigeria as an economy right now doesn't have the bandwidth to accommodate the benefits of AI. We don't have the bandwidth to accommodate the benefits of AI. Our manufacturing indices are not optimal. Our production indices are not optimal. Majority of Nigerians still live in the rural areas. Our welfare indices are not optimal. So the sectors, the private sectors that AI can be leveraged are not, haven't been well enhanced to let AI breed.
Thank you. Are you ready for the last set of questions? And this would be the last because we are up on time. So we would have Charles, we'll have Favor and Mercy Schools. Can you please give us your name? It just has Favor and Mercy Schools. And then Benedicto, we would have Benedicto. Those are the last 3 questions we'll take. Sir Charles, please go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Queen Jet. Thank you, Mr. Ogunsawo. Excellent presentation. I will be quick because in the interest of time. I was particularly happy to hear Dr. Grange talk about the fact that there is data, just that it's not being used, it's not being leveraged. And so to your point on data, I want to ask, what is the quality of data that you are referencing, number one? Number two, what type of security are you proposing that we have for the data that you are referencing? Because one of the biggest challenges we have is that of data security. I think the last your last response to the sister who was talking about AI is a reality that AI is probably not right. It's not for the Nigerian market just yet. Maybe there are institutions in Nigeria, maybe CBN and other key institutions who might rely on AI, but for the general population, AI is right now it's like a fantasy. I'm sorry to say that. On the question of childbirth and childbearing or the number of children that we have in our families, I think this Essien was correct. I mean, this ties in clearly with our culture and our religion. And you also said that, which is nobody wants to have one child because they're afraid if that child dies, they won't have any more child. So they keep having children and having children. But it will also be helpful to educate our people to know that at a certain age, it's not healthy. It's risky to the woman to continue to want to have children past 40, 45. And it's also not good for the child, because there are statistics out there that show that children born up to parents of certain age either become autistic or they become a burden to their parents and eventually to the society. So whereas we want to have large families and grow large families because we believe that's what God said we should do, be fruitful and multiply. But there are some downsides. At a certain point, we can go and adopt. There's nothing wrong with adopting another person's child when you cannot have your own. But I know our society, how they can make it look that there's something wrong with you because you can't have a baby. But we know those things do happen. And I also piggyback on what Essien said, which is America has a population of 330-something million. But you see today, they don't have enough workforce. What do? Rely on countries that are supposedly overpopulated. The Mexicans, I'm sorry for anyone who's sensitive to that kind of talk. People coming from Mexico, migrating from Mexico, or coming from Africa or from India to become employees. I think so. There's a good side to having a large population, and it's really not that large. By 2015, I think the projection is Nigeria will have about 377, something like that, 377 million. The challenge is, what is the government doing to prepare for this type of population explosion, if you will? I mean, we shouldn't be afraid of having enough people or having a lot of people, but we should be prepared to deal with this type of population explosion, if you call it that. Thank you.
Thank you, King Charles. May I have Favor and Mercy Schools? It doesn't have your name, it just has Favor and Mercy Schools.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. My name is Mayowa. So I'm just speaking on behalf of Favor and Mercy Schools anyway. So I'm going to be coming from the point of the school. I don't think the problem mainly is the population. I think the problem is poverty. So poverty is what is making the population a challenge. And somebody said earlier that we have Generation Z, Generation Alpha, who are going to maybe very soon not want to have children. But I can say for a fact that not wanting to marry is not the same thing as not wanting to have children. In fact, this Generation Z or Generation Alpha, as it's so-called, we are experiencing the worst set of generation, more irresponsible set of youth this time around. We have so many baby mamas, so many baby fathers, a lady having children for many men, and a man having children from different women. So for that, I don't think the issue is with the Generation Alpha or Generation Z. So let's come from the angle of the school. Scientists have said over time that auto-hypnosis stage is the stage between 0 and probably 14 years old. And this is the time that we believe that students are expected to be in school. So how can we harness this time such that we can bring this program or this teaching into our educational system to teach our students to be more responsible and not have the number of children that they cannot cater for? Because I don't really think the large population is the problem, but the problem is that we have a population that cannot cater for itself. So how can we bring this into our system, into the educational system, start teaching it at the early stage so that these children can be programmed, during their auto-hypnosis stage to begin to think responsibly, that they are not going to have more than number of children that they cannot cater for. Also, our religious bodies, whether Christianity or Islam, the traditional setting structure is failing already. We know that. But the religious body seems to keep going higher and higher and higher. We have more people becoming religious by the day. So what can we do to also help from the angle of religion? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And then we'll have Benedicto. That'll be the last question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for this platform, and thanks everybody. Thanks, Dr. Nelson, for inviting me here. My name is Benedicto Mbango. I don't have a question, but I just have a contribution towards the various concerns that has been raised concerning the population growth in Nigeria and also economic instability and all that stuff. From my own point of view, is that when it comes to population growth, I don't think it is a bad thing at all. It's an advantage for Nigerians or Africa as a whole, in the sense that in every country, capacity is very, very critical. So we're looking at a country like United States that we are in today, taking advantage of many other countries as consumers, you know. So they use other countries. United States itself has a lot of population that consume all its goods, and we barely import here. So I think the solution to Nigerian problem is not, you know, to stop fertility rates or how many children you know, have to come from a household and all that stuff. I think we have to increase you know, manufacturing in Nigeria and stop importation. So this will create jobs and also boost the economy, because the more we import, the more we take things, we take the money away from Nigeria and send it outside of Nigeria, wherever we're importing from. So we are not boosting the economy in Nigeria. We are not increasing employment in Nigeria, instead decreasing employment. So I think locally or through the governments, we have to be able to create opportunity manufacturing, so that, you know, through that way, you can also create jobs and, of course, be able to feed the population that we have in Nigeria. And we just should take advantage of the population, not look at it as a disadvantage, because the more population we have, the better for consumption. And when you're consuming high, you can also produce high also as well. Last thing I want to say is that let's take an example of China. China is the populated country in the world. It's the richest country, and at the same time, I want to look at it also for, great population. So, but at the same time, they have a lot of money. So they're using they're also sending their people outside of China at this time. And Africa has been one of the fields that has been able to receive a lot of Chinese to be able to explore more in the continent of Africa. And the government is sponsoring them to do that. So again, like I said, they are not decreasing their population. They are instead trying by all possible means to be able to support the population so that they can bring more economy into China. So I think Nigeria should take the same footstep. Thank you.
Thank you for your contributions. Mr. Ogunzonwo, can you please answer those questions and then also include your closing remark? We're really up on the time. And then we'll bring up Mr. President to close. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Jumoke. So Charles talked about the quality of data for population data. The World Bank aggregates on the site. They aggregate and update information on population of each of the countries of the world. So that data from the World Bank. After Nigeria had a census in 2006, the National Bureau of Statistics and the National Population Commission from time to time release population forecasts. And this population forecast, one thing that has been consistent in this population forecast is that Nigeria's net population growth rate per year is higher than 2.5%. That has been consistent from the country's Bureau of Statistics and the National Population Commission. I agree with you, like my previous stance on robotics has a role to play more in developed economies than in Nigeria. Does this mean that there are no instances where robotics can be used? No, it doesn't. Well, most times, if you look at the evolution of, AI, if you look at the evolution of AI, the platform for the evolution of AI was robotics. So robotics created the bed for AI to breed. So the question we should ask ourselves is, where is Nigeria on the global stage of robotics? And how automated and how efficient is Nigeria's private sector when it comes to manufacturing and production? Then from Favor and Mercy School, Mr. Mayowa talked about the damage, poverty, and religion, or in other words, you didn't use the word damage. The impact poverty and religion has had on Nigeria's peculiar situation. So yes, we have some pieces. It's like a chicken and the egg situation. Some people believe that the chicken came first or the egg came first. Some people say the population problem was created by poverty. Some people said no, it was the poverty that created the population problem. And that discussion never ends. But clearly, we're in a situation where millions and millions of Nigerians are being born, and millions are not getting into the prosperity, are not making it through the prosperity window. They're getting stuck in the mansion or in the bungalows of poverty. Clearly, religion has been such a sensitive topic for the government that because Nigeria is not a religious state officially, the government tries to avoid making policies that have a religious outlook. What we've seen is, yes, we've seen Sharia laws in some northern states. We've seen, but what is clear is not just the religious difference. What is clear is that the lifestyle and the peculiarities of northern Nigeria are significantly different from the peculiarities of southern Nigeria. Now, even across northern Nigeria, we still have micro peculiarities. So what I mean is, across the northern region of Nigeria, not all of the north and not all of that lifestyle or behavioral trends we've seen are the same. So within the north, there are significant differences in the north. Just like within the south, we have significant differences with the south. And one thing that research has shown is the government's attempt, based on its policies, based on its budgeting, especially the federal government in this instance, based on its policies, based on its programs, does not significantly accommodate the differences in needs across the various peculiar states and zones of Nigeria. So we have ministries that are ministries for the Federal Republic of Nigeria. However, those ministries' outlook is more nationalistic than understanding that it is different. It is different. So even our style of budgeting has to significantly change to understand the peculiarities of the different zones. The state governments also have to significantly, and the local governments have to significantly be involved in governance. The federal government has for years felt that it had the capacity to solve all of Nigeria's problems. The federal government doesn't have the capacity. The state government doesn't have the capacity alone, and local governments don't have the capacity, and we should stop acting like the solution lies in just one institution. Mr. Benedicto shared comments on the role manufacturing has to play, the need for the country to be less dependent on imports, and that is correct. Nigeria still is largely dependent on imports, but there's no country that doesn't depend on imports. What our governors and what our institutions need to do is we have to have a clear path to the road of our economic prosperity. What is the Nigerian dream? The Nigerian dream has to be well defined. Our approach has to be very consistent. We have to be determined, and we have to understand the consequences of our actions. I'll finally end with an example. A lot of Nigerians have been bothered about the falling rate of exchange rate of the naira relative to the dollar or the pound and the worsening situation. And the government has come out to say it is working towards improving the situation. But I feel that speaks to part of the challenges we face in the country. Countries have taken significant steps. Some countries have taken the position that they want a weaker currency. Other countries have taken the position that they want a stronger currency. It remains unclear what the strategy of the country is. The government needs to decide if we want a significantly weaker currency. We need to understand the significant advantages that comes with that. Export benefits, opportunities for SMEs and businesses to be able to significantly export. And there are several other benefits, just as there are downsides to having a weaker currency. Are there upsides to having a stronger currency? Yes, there are upsides to having a stronger currency, and there are downsides. But what remains the challenge is it is unclear if the government wants to have a stronger Naira, and if it deliberately wants to have a stronger Naira for future reasons, or if it wants to have a weaker Naira. If not, we'll find a situation where we'll keep dancing around in circles, trying to make the Naira stronger. Another government will come in and feel it then wants to have a weaker Naira, and then we keep just going and going and going without having a clear path. So that is the challenge, one of the major challenges of the economy. We need to be bold in taking our decisions and be able to think through it with the consequences, consideration of consequences for not just today, but for the future. Finally, like I shared, we need to take our numbers more seriously, because if we do not look at the numbers, then our days will be numbered.
Thank you so very much. This was very insightful, and I appreciate your time here. I'm going to hand over to Mr. President for his closing remark. So glad you could join us. I'm sure we'll be able to share this tape over and over again, because it's an interesting topic. Thank you.
Okay. I think we had more than we bargained for, to be honest. Oh no, I've lost my audio, my video. Can you hear me? Faye, can you hear me? Okay,
we can hear you, Pastor Itwa.
Good. I think we've gotten more than we bargained for. And we really thank our guest today for speaking so frankly and so eloquently about this and that, and the power of data.
You may want to turn off your video. You may want to turn off your video. Your sound is dragging.
Again, draws the issues that you sit on. Is it better now?
It's better now, yes.
Okay, and to see how to get our leaders to again address the issues of our national development and things like that. I think we have a lot to chew on from this discourse today. And I think we'll be calling on you again, Babajide, to help us with one or two things in the kinds of things that we want to do. I also want to thank all our discussants and question askers. In fact, some of them almost represented papers themselves. You know, it goes to show the level of interest in our nation and in our national dialogue. I'm really, really grateful about that. So, well, what else to do but to ask that we keep this thing going and we really try to speak to the heart of Nigeria. What the crusade I'm pushing now a little bit is, now we are here, 2023, 2027 will come. We need to begin to have strategic decisions as to right leadership choices. I'm hoping and praying that the leadership that we have right now will do very well, will do very, very well, and give us peace and respite in Nigeria. But I'm also hoping and praying that the subsequent leadership choices that we make in this country will truly, truly be outstanding and phenomenal. And if we can do that, then a lot of all that we spend time arguing about, discussing, quarreling with, and being disappointed about will be a thing of the past. And most of our conversations will be constructive plans to further better things. There's no perfect nation. There's no situation that cannot be improved upon. There's no situation that cannot get better. But certainly there shouldn't be a situation where people are worrying about what I call the basics and the fundamentals of life: potable water, clean energy, direction, low rates of unemployment, inflation totally out, food sustainability, and planning, the use of data for planning. Those are basic things, 101s that we should have gone way past. I'm praying that we will go way past all these things, and Jesus will continue to strengthen us. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Enjoy this lovely weekend coming. Welcome to the month of November, and let me be the first to wish you all a Merry Christmas in advance. God bless you all.
Bless you too.
And let me be the first to wish you a Happy New Year, sir, and a Happy New Year to everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We will all see
God
the new
bless
year
everyone.
in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Baba Jide will get in touch with you and
Thank
see how
you.
to deepen this conversation. NK, how are you? God bless you. Marcela, ça va bien?